Welcome to the Healing Trauma Together podcast. Let me take you on a journey to a world of all things trauma through stories and shared experiences. Hi, my name is Becky Pete and I am the founder of Healing Warriors Co. and I am also your host for this amazing journey. I am a registered nurse, midwife and child health nurse with over 15 years of experience working with families. I am a wife and a proud fur mummy to 3 beautiful girls. I am a childhood trauma survivor who overcame PTSD symptoms and severe anxiety on my continued journey, which I began in 2017. So come with me as I take you on a journey that promises to show you hope, freedom, and purpose beyond trauma. Welcome to episode 2 of Healing Trauma Together podcast. Today, I would like to share with you a story about an inspirational woman. Her name is Lieutenant Colonel Vivian Bullwinkle, and she inspired me to become a rural and remote nurse. Vivian began her nursing and midwifery career in Broken Hill, New South Wales. In 1939, she attempted to volunteer in the RAAF as a nurse, but was rejected due to having flat feet. Vivian didn't let this stop her, and instead she chose to join the Australian Army Nursing Service. She served in the Second World War from 1939 to 1945. In 1941, she sailed to Singapore to help care for the wounded soldiers. In that same year, the Japanese invaded Malaya, forcing Vivian and her colleague to evacuate on board the SS Beaverbrook, which was only meant to hold 12 passengers. And you're not going to believe how many it actually held. So it actually held over 250 people. This is how desperate they were to escape. The SS Beaverbrook was sunk by Japanese aircraft, resulting in Vivian, 21 other nurses, men, women, and children having to flee to a place called Banka Island. The women and children were sent to search for potential parties to surrender to. The soldiers and nurses stayed together. The nurses felt that it was their responsibility to care for the soldiers who had been wounded. The Japanese found the soldiers and killed them all. They did this in batches, so they would send one lot of soldiers off to the beach, and they didn't return. And this happened in several batches. On their return, the soldiers forced the nurses into the water, and while their backs were turned, machine gunned them all into the sea. The Japanese deliberately aimed for the women's hearts, as they were all of similar height and build. Vivian was taller than the other women, and this essentially saved her life. The nurses never pleaded for their lives. They were completely silent as they went into the water. Can you imagine that? Not protesting, not arguing, not begging for their life, just completely silent. The only sound heard was from their matron Drummond, who said to them, "Chin up, girls. I'm proud of you, and I love you all." The nurses stood facing the horizon as they were murdered by the Japanese. Vivian recalls them falling beside her into the waves. Vivian herself was actually struck with a bullet at her waistline, which went clean through her body and uniform. This uniform, interestingly enough, is actually held in the Canberra War Memorial and shows the bullet going through one at the front of her uniform and out the back. She pretended to be dead for well over 10 minutes, not game enough to move in case the Japanese realized they had not killed her. Vivian then spent a further 12 days in the wilderness, helping to nurse a private who also survived the men's massacre. They spent his 39th birthday in the wilderness because he didn't want to spend his 39th birthday in captivity. After his birthday, they both surrendered again to the Japanese. Vivian spent 3.5 years in a prisoner of war camp. The private she had nursed unfortunately died from his wounds. When Vivian finally made it back to Australia, she was one of 24 nurses out of 65 that had survived war. So not even half the nurses that served survived. She retired from the army in 1947 as a lieutenant colonel. But she didn't stop there. This woman is absolutely amazing. She went on to get married in 1977. She became the Director of Nursing of Melbourne's Fairfield Hospital. She also returned to Banka Island in 1992 to unveil a shrine to her fallen colleagues, fellow nurses. She dedicated the rest of her life in honour of her fallen comrades who did not make it home from the war. Vivian also, just when you thought she had stopped, she bravely testified in Tokyo about the massacre. Her evidence alone saw 21 soldiers charged over the murders. The head commander committed suicide in his cell before judgment was passed. Such incredible bravery. You just can't imagine it, right? Vivian also received the Royal Red Cross Medal, the very rare and elusive Florence Nightingale Medal, an MBE and an AO. Vivian died in WA on the 3rd of July 2000 at the age of 84. And just recently, Vivian has been honoured with the unveiling of a monument in her honour in the Canberra War Memorial in Canberra, Australia. What an incredible story. I remember seeing Vivian's portrait in the War Memorial when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And I remember reading her story and what she had overcome. And I remember thinking, if I could be half the nurse that she was, then hopefully I could do her proud and keep her honour and her story alive. So you might be thinking, what does this have to do with trauma? Well, Vivian displayed traits of resilience, strength, and chose to not play the role of the victim, despite all the odds and all the challenges she faced. And it's something we can learn from today. Resilience means to have the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. Vivian didn't let her challenges stop her from her life's purpose of serving and caring for others. In fact, she did this in spite of the challenges she faced. She didn't curl up into a ball and think, why is this happening to me? She stood and faced what was coming. She stepped into a space that enabled her to focus on others rather than herself. But she also stuck to her purpose in life, and that was to serve others. She simply refused to let what happened to her break her. The loss of her colleagues was devastating, and yet she rose from this and was part of the process that enabled justice for them by testifying. She honored their memory by being a part of the memorial dedicated to them. Interestingly enough, she never remembered the exact site of the massacre. She placed a memorial on an area she felt resembled the site on Banka Island, but it was not the exact one. Although it was a big event in her life, she allowed herself to heal and so forgot the finer details of the area. She had allowed herself to heal in the process. So often we hang on to every single little detail of the things that have been done wrong to us. I know I was guilty of this. I would hold on to and remember every single wrong that I had done to me for years. We hold on to them like a badge of honor, like it's a permanent part of us. It becomes our identity. The Vivian showed that it is possible, despite experiencing horrors, to allow your body to heal and then in fact forget. But she never forgot the women she served with. She made the active decision to focus on that rather than the horror of what they went through together. She chose to honor the people, not the event. And that's powerful because people are far more special than an event that happened to us. Resilience is something that I feel as a society we lack today. The modern technology we have on hand ensures we are used to quick solutions and instant results. Vivian's resilience was not something that was taught, but rather something she actively sought in order to survive. While Vivian endured great trauma, she chose to use that pain for positive and to create a positive impact for her community and her fallen comrades. She refused to play the victim. I feel this is her biggest superpower because despite all she endured, she never once said, "Why me?" She openly says that she did not like the spotlight and was only doing what she felt was right. But she never allowed the thought of "why me? Why do I have to go through this?" She simply went with the process. Now I know it was a different generation and they were built differently, but the truth is we can do the same. We can have that same resilience and endurance. We can decide not to play the victim, but rather to stand up and stand together in support of each other rather than trying to tear each other apart. Again, playing victim is so common in society today. And I don't mean to be political, but I'm going to share this because I feel it's important. We see the playing victim in the recent events of the Israel war. There is always one side that plays the victim rather than seeing the events for what they are. We have witnessed this in Australia too, within society, and communities choosing one side of an argument over the other, choosing to have a bias and choosing to play the victim of one side, even though it's something in Australia that we know little about. We also see this in the events of Indigenous beings versus non-Indigenous beings. The argument is so rampant in Australia, and one side choosing to play victim to something that happened so very long ago. Vivian shows us that despite the horrors of life, You can move on, you can heal, and you can find a way to have positives come from horrific events. I wonder what could change if we chose to seek the positives in these situations rather than focusing on the negatives. So much could be possible. I share Vivian's story because not only do I find it inspirational, but I also want you to have hope that your trauma does not need to define you or have an unbreakable hold on you. You can choose to step into the space and own your own story. You can build strength and your own resilience through your own healing journey. These self-imposed boundaries we put around ourselves are not necessary for us to get through life. We can acknowledge our story and be at peace with our story while also living our own life. Our story is just a small part of who we are. It's not the end, nor is it our final destination. It's just one stop on the road through our journey.